have some sports stories now, this one.
Yes. The Minister of Sport, Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, has revealed that he is not against Nigeria Football Federation President Amaju Pinnick's third-term agenda, if there is any, but he believes that the Congress decision is supreme. The minister disclosed this in an interactive session with journalists in Abuja, where he said the Congress of NFF will determine whether Pinnick will get a third term or not.
Let me say this for effect. The alter ego of the NFF is the Congress. The alter ego of the NFF is the Congress. The ministry and the government has done its job. We'll just wait and see. The Congress is supreme. So that's it. Based on the preponderance of information and development you see among the stakeholders, it's there in the open. The agitations, the expectation, people looking forward, people coming to us. We say, well, it's important to say NFF. I also agree to say the elections will be soon. Make sure the election happens. Second, even FIFA says you must domesticate. I need evidence from anyone to show that the NFF status has been properly domesticated. Because we've kept quiet for so long. Because we've kept quiet. And then the government starts to say, look, you need to do what is right. So our job is done. We have said it to say, do what is right.
Do what is right is what he's saying. And joining us to discuss developments in Nigerian sports is the Honorable Minister of Sports and Youth Development, Sunday Dare. He joins us now in the studio. Welcome, Honorable Minister. And
our sports correspondent as well, EBI IYOMON, will also be joining us on this chat. So let's begin. Honorable Minister, thank you so much for being on the news tonight. Let's begin with that conversation where you had the chat earlier today, the NFF. That's where I'd like to begin. How would you rate the NFF under an Amaju Pinnick leadership so far?
Well, first, let me say that I've been in office for about 3 years, so I've only had the opportunity to superintend or supervise the NFF as an agency of government. And of course, we've had a number of challenges, but I've had an approach that's been engaging, that's been collaborative and consultative with the leadership of the NFF, either at the level of the president, Amaju Pinnick, or at the level of the secretariat, including the general secretary and others. And we've focused on three main issues. The need to make sure that our league regains its vitality. We bring about an enforcement regime of licensing and financials, etc. But also on the aspect of making sure that youth football development takes center stage, because that is actually the live wire of any football development eventually. The last part has to do with governance, good governance around the structure of our football in our country. And it's been an ongoing conversation. I think the jury is still out on the tenor. I don't think that as a minister I should pass judgment right now. What I can say is that we've had periods and intervals in which we've been able to get things done, go over the hurdle. And I think that that's important. Irrespective of whoever is in charge of that federation, that engagement and interface with government or the supervisory ministry must continue in tandem.
Absolutely, which is quite important. And let's talk about football a bit more before we get AB to coming. The Super Falcons, 9-time African champion, started in Morocco on a very disastrous note, honestly. But do you still think that the Super Falcons will be able to, get the cup at the end of the day? Looking at how they started, even though we know Burundi and Botswana as debutants, they'll be easy for us. But I'm looking at the end here as it concerns this competition.
When it comes to sports, very unpredictable. Sometimes you might wobble at the start, you pick up your straps, and then you do what is expected of you. As we speak, I know that there are 2 goals up. We've seen the kind of coherence we expect to see from them. We've seen that tenacity. We've seen the thirst for goals in the 8-yard box. So I am confident these girls, young ladies, have delivered for us as a country over time. They They have cut their teeth. They have done the hard work. They play for great teams, professional teams across the globe. They will come together. They will deliver for our country. So I just want to sue that you let's believe in these young ladies, because they will do great for our country.
Be able to get the 10th cup there.
I am optimistic.
Well,
I am optimistic that they will deliver for our country.
All right, AV, it's over to you.
Honourable Minister, you'll be 3 years in office in the next couple of weeks. What would you say is your landmark achievement?
Well, first, it has to do with the clear vision we had when we took over, knowing very well that sports development was critical, that the country must depart from episodal sports development where you simply fund international and continental competitions. Those are episodal attempts at sports development. When you talk about sports development, you look at grassroots sports development, you look at talent hunt, you look at youth development, you look at developing and supporting the federations to bring talents that will compete for the country and attain podium performances. So we focused on infrastructure, and we've been able to deliver to a large extent. We moved away from just waiting for government to developing a very robust and aggressive public-private partnership under the ADOPT initiative. And we had 3 flavors. The ADOPT, a pitch or facility. We've been able to deliver the Mashood Abiola Stadium in Abuja after almost 10, 11 years of abandonment, where we met the pitch. It became a farmland. That has been delivered. We've had several international matches played there. We moved on to Surulere, Lagos, 19 years of neglect and abandonment. We did the same model applied, and then we have it's almost 65% on its way to delivery. We have the Obafemi Awolowo Stadium, the first of its kind in Africa, the #1 some time back, normally referred to as Liberty Stadium. It's also on its way back, primarily from funding from government. We've worked with Governor El-Rufai in Kaduna in the last 2 years to bring back the Ahmadu Bello Stadium, the ABS in Kaduna. And as we speak, in the next few months or weeks, we should be handing over the Ahmadu Bello Stadium to the Kaduna State government so that we can have the funding and the maintenance that is necessary. So at the level of infrastructure, we've done that. But at the level of also working at good governance around sports development, working with the federations, making sure that the responsibilities and the lines are clear. Even though the lines might be thin, they are there. The government has a responsibility. The federations have a responsibility. We are under the sovereignty and the constitution of our country, and everybody must respect the role that is played by each and every person. I think those two are critical for us, and that's the focus.
Well, despite this landmark achievement you've listed, and of course you've also identified the challenges that are left, the bickering, the factions and the federations, that has cost us a great deal in some competitions. Would you say you're satisfied with your role as the head of that ministry? For instance, the NBBF and the AFN there have been some challenges with them. Would you say you're satisfied with the way your administration has tackled all this bickering?
Well, to a very large extent, we've been properly guided as a ministry and as an institution, because we're statutory, we understand the laws, we understand our powers, and we had a choice to either stand aloof, keep quiet, and do basically nothing. And when we try to step in, the question of interference comes in. And I keep saying, look, there's a thin line. There's interference and there's intervention. We cannot be sentenced to silence. Government cannot be sentenced to silence on the basis of the card that somebody is going to waive, the interference and intervention card, as the case may be. But let me speak to AFN. Yes, we met some of these challenges were inherited. The AFN, we had a board that bickered. We tried to mediate, it didn't work. But then that's settled. After 2 years, they went for election. A president emerged. The World Athletics that has the final say said this is the faction we recognize. Everything calm. The NBBF, an ongoing crisis for 5 years. Others will argue for 12 years. We consulted. As a minister, I consulted with previous ministers. And they said that we inherited this problem. We tried, but we did not succeed. What do? We had a number of meetings, some of them out there in the open, some of them outside, just off the radar. It's been ugly on this side. But we found every party had their feet set in wet cement. And the question was, what is the interest here? I thought the interest ought to have been national interest, the interest of our athletes, and the interest of developing basketball. We have seen in 5 years how our domestic league has suffered. We have seen in 5 years how different parties have been on different pages. But we bided our time until election time. On October 30th, we stopped the election because the bickering over constitutional issues was so much. But we worked with FIBA to gain a period of another 60 days, bringing a reconciliation committee to do what is necessary. Even after that, what happened? 2 presidents emerged. We had a number of agitations on the part of players, threats of boycott, signatures and petitions. It was just unending. So we had to take a position. We had all the facts. We had to present the facts before the federal government, and a decision had to be taken. You know, something must give when you have this unending crisis. Someone must drive the fork into the ground to get the right things done. And we felt putting band-aid over this crisis for a long time would not be the resolution. Eventually, we are where we are right now because somebody drove the fork into the ground. Of course, unfortunately, there are regrets that something had to give. But then we have the opportunity of a new day. We have commitment to do X, Y, Z. And we're going to hold them to that commitment because it has the imprimatur of the federal government and the president. And I'll be mandated to make sure that they follow through on those constitutional reviews.
All right. Well, AB?
Yeah, the minister, speaking on the NBBF, there was a reversal and a ban and all. But before the reversal of the ban, there was an IMC that was appointed or inaugurated. Will the KIDA-led board actually implement the agendas that were set in place for the IMC?
No, the IMC was a product of the withdrawal of Nigeria from international basketball competitions. We never dissolved the NBBF because we also felt it was important to leave a window for resolution. With the development we have had, the letter from the NBBF board and leadership to work with the plan and the template put forward, most critical being the status review, the part of reconciliation of all parties. That opportunity and that window is there right now. And the NBBF board is fully in charge, which means that the IMC will have to step aside, will be dissolved, and we allow NBBF to continue to play its role. But let me also quickly add, the ministry has started what is called the National Grassroots Development Program for every of our sport, where we find any sport where the domestic league or the youth league, youth arm of that sport has suffered. We will activate the National Grassroots Sports Development to play that role. So the NBBF right now is in situ, and we know that there's a timetable with the status review so that the constitutional crisis can be over. That automatically resolves the leadership crisis for a large extent. But ultimately, let me say this. The alter ego of every federation, whether it's the NFF, whether it's the NBBF, whether it's the AFN, the alter ego of any federation is the Congress, the elective Congress. We understand our role, intervention. As supervisors, having oversight powers, when we see something trying to go wrong, we provide the advice, we provide the direction, and we expect that what we get is some level of applause to say, okay, thank you, we'll do the right thing. And we'll watch very closely.
Well, sometimes you don't get applauded, especially looking at how, you know, the Tigers will not be going to Australia, but instead they have been replaced by Mali. But let's talk a little bit about your legacy as we get ready to wrap up today. What would you say are some of the biggest disappointments that you have actually faced, especially looking at the fact that Nigeria, for the first time in a long time, we are not going to the World Cup, and we lost to Ghana here at home?
Well, you just mentioned it. I think the biggest disappointment is the fact that our country won't be at the Qatar 2022 in spite of all the efforts, the investment, the energies, you know. But it's regrettable, because I also know that on the part of government, on the part of players, on the part of the NFF, everyone made concerted effort. But I keep saying it, football is not 100%. And there are lessons learned. And that's why soon after that happened, the cycle comes on so quickly. You must start that preparation right now. And you've seen an attempt to rebuild the national team. You've seen an attempt to make sure that we try to get a few things right now without cutting corners. So it's a major disappointment. I'm also disappointed that the basketball crisis took so long and had to lead us to take a decision, because government had to take a decision. There was no room for not taking any decision. I wish that the stakeholders had put the national interest and the interest of the athletes ahead, so that we will not be where we are. But of course, we've had a reversal. We've seen our team go to the qualifiers in Kigali. We've seen them, even prior, they have gone to Angola, they've gone to Kigali, they've qualified for the next round. We hope that eventually things will settle down in the federations.
We do hope so. I'll ask you more about your role and the interference you spoke about, but let's bring in AB. AB, you have a question for the Honorable Minister.
Yes, definitely. In a couple of weeks, Nigeria will be at the Commonwealth and competing in 9 games. We've seen efforts for the trials and all, and medal hopefuls, athletes like Ese Brume, Toby Amuso and all. What would you say is the level of preparations for these athletics championships and the Commonwealth Games?
I think the national trials which took place in Benin City, Ogbemudia Stadium, clearly signpost our level of preparation, because it's a culmination of the efforts we've made, having open trials, having the classics, and eventually bringing all our athletes, both at home and abroad, to come for that final selection. And that speaks very clearly and loudly to the track and field events. But outside of that, we've had our wrestlers camped in Bayelsa, we've had our weightlifters camped in Kogi, Lokoja here, and every federation has done some kind of closed and open camping. There's a grand number when you go to international competitions like this, and the ministry, working with the federations, has been working on that. I believe that you've seen the performances of our athletes at the NCAA, you've seen their performances at Grand Circuits, you've seen them set new records, smash all records. We've seen their superlative performances. We just pray that there will be no injuries, and our athletes, after they leave the World Championship in Oregon, will be able to stay fit and focused and go to Commonwealth to do our country proud.
We also do wish them the very best in these competitions. But Honorable Minister, let me come back to that question about interference and, as government, your role. Where do you draw the line? Because there have been allegations that, your ministry and you in particular, you interfere with the day-to-day running of the NFF, for instance. There are reports that you forced the NFF to sack Gernot Rohr. There are also reports that you made the country take that decision to have that competition here in Abuja, as against the NFF's decision to have that match that led to, of course, we all know what happened and we've been fined for it. The NFF decided to use the stadium in Uyo, but your interference made it come to Abuja. Your name has also come up with the controversial Afa kits, the D-Tigress not wanting to wear those kits anymore. All of this. So where do you really draw the line? And this is your chance to react to some of those accusations.
And I would have been surprised if you didn't bring this up. I'm going to react to some I will basically not react to it.
Go ahead.
Because, I was smiling when you were raising these issues. Mm-hmm. And it's part of it is scapegoating. Part of it is it's a deliberate attempt as trying to defame someone's character. Mm-hmm. But let me start from the point of the fact that as a sports minister, I superintend the sports development of this country. The NFF draws its legitimacy, like other federations, from the federal government and the sovereignty of this nation. It is not entirely independent. So in performing my role, if you think that is interference, then you have a problem. We've had several ministers prior to now. When you have consultation, when I have to take a decision, I take a decision. But it's easy. When things don't go right, you look for scapegoat. And what I hear is a lot of scapegoating. Okay. I fired Rohr, I did this. Listen, I've done my job as the minister to to make sure that right decisions are taken. Some of these decisions were not taken unilaterally. It was consultative. And it's a pity that people, because certain things have not gone the way they wanted to go, they're stepping out to malign character, to say a lot of things. But basically, we have taken decisions guided by the information we have had. Excuse me, coaches are fired every time. I stood against Rohr's second term coming back. The NFF provided a compelling reason to bring him back. Before he was relieved of his job, we had meetings, several meetings. There are letters, evidence to show that it was a process. The ministry or the minister did not just wake up one day and decide that, oh, Rohr must go. So when I hear all of this, sometimes I just wonder. But I think people should own up to their responsibility. I own up to mine. There's no 100% decision. We take some, we live with it, but we must take a decision and move forward, and that's what we've done.
Okay. Right. Well, Honorable Minister, some have also accused you of staying. You know, you have a double portfolio, youth and sports development. Some would say you focused on the sports alone and neglected the path of youth development. So talk to us about what you did in that regard. And also, I do know that during your tenure so far, 3 years on, you have tried to get, you know, sports to be self-sufficient in terms of financing. You've come up with a lot of, you know, measures to see that happen. Where would you say we are now in terms of sports being self-sufficient and not really looking at the coffers of government to get things running?
You mean sports or youth
Both.
development? All right. Well, I think for sports,
You have a double portfolio.
for sports, we've been able to develop a public-private partnership model. We've seen it deliver for our country. We hope that we can deepen that. But most importantly, we hope we can deliver on the national sports industry policy, which has as its core a business model that is strong enough to attract private investment. It stands on, has three triggers, which is investment, incentive, and also investment, infrastructure, investment, and incentive. We believe that when we're able to deliver that and we get the support we need from government, that will kind of bring about the resources that we need. Now, when it comes to youth development, we've tried to put youth development on even keel with sports development, and we've had some really important initiatives. I speak of the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund that we never had before, a fund dedicated to our youth, young entrepreneurs, to invest in their innovative minds and also to help them, their enterprise. That fund is 25 billion per year for the next 3 years. Right now we have about 32 to 35,000 youth who are in line benefiting between 250,000 naira to 3 million naira. That's one. On our part also, we have the digital training program. We've trained over 200,000 youth and a couple of other programs that are ongoing. Now, there's a challenge of resources. There's a challenge of scale because we want to do more, but we're limited by resources. But we've given equal attention to both sports and youth development. We hope that partnering with other ministries and MDAs, we're able to deliver more for our youth.
Well, EBI, you have the final shot. I think in sports, in football in particular, this may be the penalty shot to the minister. So go ahead.
Okay, briefly from me, we're speaking about autonomy of federations. How well would you say these federations are autonomous, financially autonomous? Because when you came in, you spoke about sports business, but it seems these federations do not want to be autonomous, but want the money for themselves.
Well, let me start by saying there's a code of governance that guides the operation and the relationship between the Ministry of Youth and Sports and our sporting federation. And the spirit and letter of that code of governance creates a wiggle room for our sporting federations to enjoy some level of independence where they can source for their own fund and be accountable to the board for it. Whatever they get from government, they are also accountable for it. But we don't interfere in whatever is sourced from private sources. Now, there's been the argument about making them fully autonomous. That means they can register as NGOs, they have their board, they can sue and be sued. But the fact is that 90% of them cannot survive without the funding they get from government. So we have a choice. As a country, do we want to snuff out the life out of all these federations and let them die, or keep that partnership going? And that's been the rubric we've met on ground. That's been the rubric I've followed. But has also been the bone of contention, because it now becomes, where do you draw the line? They say who plays the piper, takes the tune. But also we are guided. We're saying, listen, there's a code of governance. We have a responsibility to make sure that elections are held on time, to make sure that there's no crisis, and where there is, to call the leaders to say, listen, we don't want crisis here. Can you go ahead and do what is necessary? And I think that the future of our sports development would depend largely on how the collaborative effort between the ministry and these federations is managed in such a way that ego is taken out and national interest
You
is
seem to
put
have your
ahead.
plate full, Honorable Minister.
Honestly.
But before we let you go, I know that I said that was a penalty shot, but I do have another shot. The doping crisis we've seen with some of our athletes, especially Blessing Okagbare, who was once the nation's jewel. What are you doing? What is the ministry doing in her regard to help her? Very briefly, Minister.
Well, you know, while the investigations were on, if you know the code, international code, both ministry and individuals, there's hardly anything you can do. You know, that area is almost sub judice. But that now that we've had the verdict, I say it's very unfortunate. She was one of our best and brightest, and the news hit us real hard. What we have done is to get several of our very top sports administrators who have been with her for a long time, who she regards as very close elders, to speak with her. We are looking at basically sending 1 or 2 people to go meet her, because we also...
Blessing Okagbare, Honorable Minister, what are you doing? What are your plans really to end doping in Nigeria? Because it seems to be a reoccurring phenomenon.
Well, let me state that first we've set up an anti-doping committee, reinvigorated, led by Professor Ken, working very strenuously to make sure that we get off the A category. That work is a silent work, and we get monthly report. We also work closely with WADA in South Africa. I've had several online meetings with them. We send reports to them. They come in quietly. But also we've tried to do a number of seminars. In Benin, for instance, we made sure that we had a 2-hour seminar with all our athletes to make sure that they know what the risk is.
Well, it's a pleasure to finally get you to have this interview, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sport Development. And sorry for changing the rules of the game. We kept having our last shots at you. But thank you so much,
had to get
Mr.
the last
Sunday Dare,
Thank you very
Nigeria's
much.
Minister
Thank
of
you
Youth
for
and Sport,
having
for
me.
being on
The
the show.
final bouquet.
And
Thank you.
EBI IYOMON, our sports correspondent, for joining us on this conversation as well. Thank you, EBI.